A powerful chief stood before his entire assembly. His elders were there. His war chiefs were there. Hundreds of people stood watching in heavy silence. And he pointed toward one young woman standing at the very back of the gathering. Not a chief's daughter, not a wealthy trader, just a humble woman who gathered roots from the forest every morning and prepared herbal medicine by lantern light every evening. He pointed at her and said in a voice that filled the entire compound, "I have chosen her." She looked at him. She did not bow. She did not kneel. And what she said next made the entire tribe go completely silent. This was not an ordinary chief. His name was Chief Ogunwale. He ruled over 15 villages and controlled trade routes that stretched across 3 kingdoms. His cap was heavy with cowrie shells. His staff was wrapped in leopard skin. Armored guards stood beside him with spears that gleamed in the afternoon sun. But this woman, this quiet herbalist with mud on her feet and a plain wrapper tied around her shoulders, looked him directly in the eyes, lifted her chin, and spoke 4 words no one in that gathering had ever heard spoken to a chief. She said, "I cannot accept, my lord." Not in fear, not in weakness. She said it clearly, in the open air, where every elder and every war chief and every onlooker could hear her voice carry across the compound. The words fell into that gathering like a heavy stone dropped into a deep river. The ripples spread through every single person standing there. The elders stopped mid-conversation. The war chiefs gripped their spears tighter. The women covering their mouths with their hands. Even the drummer who had been playing a welcome rhythm stopped his hands halfway over the drum. A village herbalist had just refused a powerful chief. Publicly. In front of his whole tribe. Her name was Nkiruka. She was 26 years old. Her wrapper was faded from many washings, the deep indigo now almost gray. Her feet were bare because she had walked 9 miles that morning to reach the chief's compound after the cart she had arranged had broken its wheel. Her hands still smelled faintly of the aloe and neem she had been grinding before sunrise. Her skin was the deep, rich brown of the forest floor after a long rain. But her eyes were the reason Chief Ogunwale had stopped his entire choosing ceremony and pointed at her from across the courtyard. They held something none of the daughters of chiefs in that compound possessed. They held stillness. They held sober judgment. They held a quiet understanding of the world that wealth and titles had never been able to buy.
And she had looked at Chief Ogunwale with those eyes. And she had said no. The chief did not strike her. He did not move. He just stood very still, his jaw tightening, his eyes never leaving her face. This was not supposed to happen. Nothing about Nkiruka was supposed to happen. But she was standing there, barefoot and tired, in his compound, and between them, though neither of them fully understood it yet, was a truth that had been buried for almost 25 years. A truth that his own senior wife had hidden beneath the floor of the family shrine with her own hands. Now, let us go back a little, so you can understand everything that brought this moment to life. Chief Ogunwale had been a young warrior at 20 when his father, the old Chief Adebayo, died during the long dry season after a brief illness. The morning his father died, bees gathered at the entrance of the compound. Nobody understood what it meant. The elders said it was a sign. Some said it was a warning. His mother, the old Iyale Moremi, had worn thick black cloth around her waist for 40 days. Then she called her son into the inner chamber and told him he would be chief now. She said it the way a woman says it when she has been preparing for the words her whole life. Chief Ogunwale had taken over a wealthy chiefdom, good farmland, fishing rivers that never ran dry, a strong treasury his father had built carefully over many years of fair trade and honest judgment. But he had also inherited his father's silence, because the old chief, for all his fame and authority, had always seemed to Ogunwale like a man searching for something he had lost. He would sit by the compound gate in the early hours of the morning, staring down the road, as if waiting for someone who would never come. Ogunwale had grown up watching his father do this. He never understood it. Now that he wore the chief's cap himself, he was beginning to wonder if it was something far deeper than the weight of rule. He was not a cruel chief. He was firm when he needed to be firm. But the people who worked closest to him knew he remembered the names of every servant in his compound. He asked after sick children by name. He once stopped an important council meeting because he heard an old woman coughing outside the meeting house and asked a guard to bring her water and medicine before continuing. His people respected him. In the outer villages, many of them loved him quietly. It was during one of his monthly tours to the outer villages to settle disputes that he first saw Nkiruka. She was at the edge of the forest, carrying a heavy basket of fresh roots on her head.
She held it easily, the way only people who had carried heavy loads since childhood can. She was humming a quiet melody, an old forest song her grandmother had taught her. When she noticed the chief's long procession approaching, she did not run. She did not panic. She simply stepped aside, lowered her basket respectfully but calmly, and waited. Her eyes were steady. Her shoulders were straight. Chief Ogunwale kept walking, but he never stopped thinking about those eyes for the rest of that day. Nkiruka lived in a small compound at the edge of her village with her grandmother, Neolu. Neolu was 71 years old. Her knees had been swollen and painful for years from the hard work of farming, and she could only walk very slow, short steps now. Nkiruka woke up before sunrise every morning to grind herbs. She swept the compound. She walked into the forest to gather roots and leaves. She came home and prepared her medicines. Then she sat by lantern light and poured mixtures into clay pots and bottles that the villagers paid her small coins for. On market days, she carried her baskets to the village square to sell her prepared medicines to traders who came from distant towns. Sometimes, when she thought nobody was watching, she would sit at the edge of the well, dip her tired feet into the cool water, and just sit for a few quiet minutes, her eyes closed, breathing slowly. She never complained about her life. This was not because she did not notice how heavy it was. She noticed. She simply believed, deep in her heart, that a person's worth is never decided by how much they own. It is decided by how honestly they carry themselves through the days they have been given. She had never known her mother. Neolu had raised her from infancy. Whenever Nkiruka asked about her mother, something difficult would move across her grandmother's face, a mixture of grief and love, and something that looked very much like fear. Neolu would only say, "Your mother was the kindest, most gentle woman the village ever knew. The forest spirits took her too soon." Then she would change the subject immediately. Nkiruka had learned, over the years, not to press the question. But she had never stopped wondering. There was always something behind her grandmother's silence, something that felt less like mourning and more like a woman trying to keep her granddaughter safe from a truth the world was not ready to hear.
The letter came on a Wednesday. A palace messenger arrived at their small compound. His clothes were neat. His face showed nothing. He handed Nkiruka a sealed envelope with the chief's royal stamp pressed into red wax.
Neolu, sitting in her chair under the shade tree, saw that stamp and went very still. Her hands, which had been sorting dried hibiscus flowers in her lap, pressed tightly together.
"What does it say, my daughter?"
she asked, in a voice that was soft in a way it usually was not.
"They are calling me to the chief's compound," Nkiruka said slowly, reading the letter aloud. "For the choosing gathering." She looked up. "Grandmother, they are asking me to the choosing gathering." The choosing gathering was an old tradition in the chiefdom. Iale Moremi had brought it back when her son took the title. Once every dry season, young women from all across the 15 villages were invited to the chief's compound for a great ceremony. If the chief wished, he would choose a woman from among them to begin a proper courtship. Most young women considered this the highest honor their lives would ever receive. Neolu did not speak for a long moment. Her eyes filled with something heavy. "Think about this very carefully, my daughter. You do not have to go." "But of course I will go, grandmother," Nkiruka said, carefully folding the letter. "The welcome gift alone will pay for your medicine this season." "Nkiruka." Neolu's voice changed. It dropped low. It became urgent. "Listen to me carefully. That family—" But at that exact moment, a neighbor called from the compound gate, asking about a herbal mixture she had promised that morning, and the conversation was interrupted. Neolu turned her face back toward the hibiscus flowers. She said nothing more. Whatever she had been about to tell her granddaughter stayed locked inside her for one more day. Nkiruka went to the chief's compound the following morning. She wore her best wrapper. She walked the 9 miles alone because the cart she had arranged had broken one of its wheels the night before. By the time she arrived, her feet ached, and the hem of her wrapper was dusty from the long road. The other women in the great compound were beautiful in bright silk wrappers, gold jewelry, and colorful beaded necklaces. Nkiruka stood near the back and watched them all. Her face was calm, the kind of calm that comes only from having lived through many long, hard days. Then the chief walked in. He looked past the jewelry, past the perfume, past the practiced smiles and the lowered eyes of the chief's daughters. His eyes found Nkiruka at the very back of the gathering, dusty wrapper, bare feet, standing alone. Something deep in his face changed. He walked toward her. The crowd parted quietly for him.
He stopped directly in front of her and said, quietly enough that only she could hear, "I have been thinking about your eyes since the day I walked past the forest edge 3 weeks ago." Then he stepped back. He turned to face the entire gathering. He raised his voice and said clearly in front of everyone, "I have made my choice. I choose this woman." At that moment, the compound erupted. People clapped. Women covered their mouths in surprise. A wave of disbelief moved through the crowd, and Nkiruka looked at the chief. She did not clap back. She did not look away. She stood very still, and something moved deep inside those quiet eyes of hers. Not excitement, not pride, not the joy her village had expected from her. Something that looked far more like sorrow. And she spoke. "I am sorry, my lord. I cannot accept the choosing." The compound went completely silent. Even the wind through the she-tree leaves seemed to stop. Chief Ogunwale stared at her for a long breath. Then he spoke again, his voice dropping low. "Speak clearly, daughter. Tell me why you refuse." And Nkiruka leaned forward slightly, and she said 5 quiet words, only for him. 5 words that pulled every drop of color from his face. He stepped back as though something heavy had struck him across the chest. He ended the gathering immediately. He told the compound the choosing was finished,
and as the guards began moving everyone gently toward the exit, he stood alone at the center of that great compound, with those 5 words circling around and around inside his mind, like the sound of a talking drum that will not stop beating. Those 5 words were, "Your mother killed mine." The chief did not sleep that night. He lay on his mat in his private chamber and stared at the roof beams and turned those 5 words over and over in his mind. Your mother killed mine. He told himself the woman was confused. He told himself somebody had filled her head with lies. He told himself many things. But morning came, and those 5 words were still sitting in his chest like a stone he could not push out. Before the sun had fully risen, he was already at his desk, sending for his most trusted aide, a quiet, careful man named Babatunde, who had served the chief's compound for 19 years. "I need everything," the chief said, his voice low and tight. "About a village herbalist named Nkiruka, her family, where she came from, every single thing you can find." Babatunde came back by midday. The information he carried was thin and old. Nkiruka was 26 years old. Her grandmother, Nneolu, had raised her since she was a baby. Her mother's name in the village records was Adeze Onuoha. Father unknown, mother deceased. She had died 26 years ago, only 2 months after her daughter was born. Chief Ogunwale read the name again. Adeze Onuoha. Something deep at the back of his memory pulled at him, like a name he had once heard in a different time of his life, in a different room of the family compound. He went to the family record keeper. It was a small, quiet building that smelled of old paper and dry timber. The chief walked slowly through the shelves and pulled out old record books from the years of his father's rule. He was not sure what he was even looking for. He told himself he was just checking a name. He found it in a dusty book from 26 years ago. Adeze Onuoha. Listed as a guest at the chief's compound. She had stayed for 9 months. The reason recorded was, personal guest of His Royal Highness Chief Adebayo. The chief sat down on the wooden floor of the record house with the book open in his hands. The floor was cold through his wrapper. The dust in the room settled quietly around his shoulders. Personal guest. 9 months. He pulled out more books, more records. He found a section where 8 months of records had been carefully removed, not torn, cut cleanly with a sharp blade, as if someone had done it carefully, slowly, with absolute intention. Then, in an old accounts book from 25 years ago, he found one single small line written in handwriting he did not recognize. Payment to Herbalist BC for services. Village moved. Matter closed. Matter closed. His hands were not steady when he closed the book. He found the old herbalist BC only 4 days later. The woman was 82 now. She lived alone in a small, warm house deep in the forest, 20 miles from the chief's compound. She had not practiced herbal medicine in many years. Her hands shook badly with age. Her eyes were very weak. But when Chief Ogunwale arrived unannounced at her door, the old woman's face did something very particular. It went white. And she stepped back and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "I always knew this day would come." The chief sat across from her in the small room that smelled of dried mint and old wood. "Tell me about Adeze Onuoha," he said. The old woman closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was something deep inside them that looked like relief. The relief of a woman who had been carrying an unbearable secret for a very long time, and who had finally been given permission to set it down. "Your father," the woman began very slowly, "truly loved her. I want you to understand that first. He loved her with his whole heart. She was the daughter of a village cloth weaver, educated, gentle, beautiful inside and out. They first met during one of your father's yearly tours to the outer villages, before your mother had full control of the compound's inner affairs. She paused. He brought her quietly to stay in the chief's compound for 9 months. And she loved him too. She became pregnant with his child. Outside the small house, a light rain had started falling, soft and steady. Your mother found out, Queen Mother Moremi. She was not yet the senior wife in those days, but she was already the most powerful woman in the compound. She understood exactly what Adaize's child would mean, a first child, born before you. A child who could one day challenge her own children's claim to the chief's staff. The old woman's voice went very quiet. She came to me privately one night. She told me to remove Adaize from the chief's compound at once, to give her money, to send her far enough away that your father could not find her, to break her heart with a lie if I had to. And then she told me. The old herbalist paused again, her eyes filling with old tears. She told me to make sure the child did not survive. The room went completely still. I refused that last part, the woman said, and her voice had become the voice of a person defending the one good thing she had done in an entire life full of compromises. I told her I would not do it. We argued for many days. In the end, Adaize was sent away with enough money to live on. She was given a small compound in a village far from the chief's town. She carried her baby in her arms. She was told your father had agreed to end all contact. She was told he had forgotten her. She was told many cruel lies. And she was very young. She was only 21 years old, and her heart had just been broken completely. The herbalist's voice dropped to almost nothing. She died 6 weeks after I helped move her to the village. The local healer said it was childbed fever. But those of us who knew her understood what had truly happened. She had given up on living. Her heart had simply stopped. Chief Ogunwale sat with this truth for a very long time. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. The rain kept falling outside. The mint smell in the small room had become suddenly far too sweet. He thought about his father at the compound gate, those long, early morning silences, that searching gaze on a man's face that had always looked like he was looking for someone he could never find again. His father had never known the truth. He had been told that Adaize had chosen to leave, that she wanted no contact. He had lived 30 years carrying a grief he could not fully explain, because the woman he had loved had vanished one day, and nobody had ever been brave enough to tell him the real reason. And Nkiruka with her strong, quiet eyes, and her straight back, and her deep knowledge of the healing roots, was his father's daughter, his sister. This truth did not hit him like a loud wave. It hit him like the stillness after a great wave. The moment when the water has passed, and everything around you has been quietly moved, and the whole world looks completely different from how it looked only moments before. He drove back to the chief's compound quickly. By the time the large gates appeared in front of him, he had made a decision. And that decision sat in his chest like iron, heavy and certain, and impossible to shake. He went to Nkiruka first. He found her the following morning at the edge of her village, walking back from the forest with a fresh basket of roots balanced on her head. He came alone. No guards. Plain clothes. When she saw him walking toward her, her eyes went wide for only one breath, then settled back into their quiet calm. "You looked into it," she said. It was not a question. "I did," he answered. Sit with me for a moment. They sat together on a low stone wall at the edge of the village path. Around them, the daily world kept moving. Mothers called to their children. Traders called out the prices of their goods. The smell of roasting yam and wood smoke drifted through the morning air. "How long have you known?" the chief asked. "Since I was 22, Nkiruka said quietly. Neolu told me on a night when she thought she was going to die. She had a very heavy fever. She believed it was her final night on earth. She told me everything she knew about my mother, about the chief's compound, about the chief who was my father." She looked down at her own hands for a moment. "She recovered from the fever, and I have carried the secret alone ever since." "Why did you not speak before now?" Chief Ogunwale asked gently. "What could I have done?" she answered. "Walked up to the gates of the chief's compound and told the guards that the senior wife there had sent my mother away to die? They would have laughed at me. They would have driven me away. Or worse." She paused. "When the letter came for the choosing gathering, I almost did not go. But Neolu said, 'Go, my daughter.' She said the ancestors organize things in their own time. She said truth always finds its way into the open air." A small, quiet smile crossed her face. "She did not expect me to refuse the chief in front of his whole gathering. But I did." She met his eyes steadily. "Because accepting your choosing, without you knowing the truth first, would have been just another buried thing. And I am tired of buried things." He looked at her for a long, quiet time. She let him look. "You are my sister," he finally said. His voice was full. Nkiruka nodded once, her eyes bright. "Yes," she said softly. "I am." Thank you, dear listeners, for sitting with us through this story. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story.
Press the subscribe button for many new untold African folktales, only on Untold African.